Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 62. We're going to talk today a little bit about how our hay supply is coming here this summer and some of the management decisions we're having to make as a result of it. I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering here at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky with my husband, about a 500-acre commercial.
I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering as well. We're focused on precision livestock farming. In my home life, we raise vegetarian Angus cattle, have some goat production, also focus on some hay production as well.
Okay, Josh. So before we get too far into the hay discussion, let's talk about other things that are happening on the farm, and we'll circle back to hay.
All right, so we had the Mercer County Fair this past week. Had the beef, goat, and sheep show, so that all seemed to go fairly well.
Good.
Also, just on the farm, we've been trying to, like everybody else in the county, we had a little bit of a window there to try to get some hay done. So we were able to get some hay done. Most of it wasn't rained on. Some of it was rained on for about a week. So we endured the challenges just like everybody else.
Yeah, we had very similar weather patterns. We had hay down. We got part of it up. Part of it got rained on. Part of it got then put into a roll. Then it got rained on again before we got it out of the field. It felt like we were every time we thought we were getting caught up, then it rained again out of whack with what was being predicted.
Yes.
On the other hand, I will say this, that we purchased some hay, and we know some people. This is interesting for anyone that's familiar with the area. Josh farms in Mercer County. I farm in Boyle County. We sit sort of on that south and western side of the Kentucky River. And I know someone that farms just on the other side, on the Wilmore, Nicholasville side of the river. And they said they could literally see rain all around them, and it never rained on them. They have hay that they got up dry. Well, it rained once on the hay, but then, which would have been the first rain that we got, like almost an inch of rain in like an hour. But they caught that rain, but they missed the next two like pop-up rains that we got sort of in evenings that got our hay rained on after we got it back into the bale. So pretty interesting, but they missed those rains, and so they brought us some hay that actually wasn't wet when all of our hay was wet. So I guess I wouldn't complain, because it could be another very dry summer, and currently we're getting rain, which is not something I'm going to complain about. Yeah,
and I had one producer tell me he had the cleanest hay in Washington County, but that's just because it got washed every time it rained on it. So.
That's one way of looking at it. That's a glass half full kind of guy right there. So, or gal, I assume it's a guy, but it could be either. That's funny, actually. Yeah, it's been one of those kind of weeks where the weather has not been very predictable around here. So, Matt Dixon, we're looking at you.
Yeah, I was he was on vacation. I was sending him a text message every time it rained. I was like, look at this. And we were having some bearing issues on our baler. So one of the bearings went out. That also, we're going along thinking we can make it, then, you're obviously inevitably going to have issues take place. So.
Yeah, we've had a couple issues with our hay buying our mowers. So we have some repair work to do. Fortunately, we are now in a spot where we have about 3 weeks before anything else is ready to cut. So we have a window here before we need anything working again. But that is a priority, is getting that fixed. So when we get to the end of the show, we'll definitely discuss that. Aside from that, rotations on cattle are going pretty well.
Yep. When it rains, at least you have grass.
We do have grass. I will say that we will end up short cycling because it's been really hot. And so some of our grass is not growing as well as it could be. Not that it's not growing, but we will end up on a slightly, typically we get about a week to 10 days on a lot of our fields. Some of these might end up being 5-day rotations just to keep from overgrazing pastures, right. Which means we'll be on what I would call a short cycle. And hopefully by the end of this one short cycle, we'll get into September and some cooler weather, and that will
allow
us to stretch out back to a more typical rotation pattern.
And then we did, so I did get a buggy this past week and did try to, I was like, we're close enough to August, in my opinion. So I did some, try to do some stockpiling. So threw down some nutrients. So 50 pounds in, and then also whatever DAP and potash you needed. Well,
I think that's not a bad idea. And we're gonna let's come back into our main topic today, because I think this probably ties in perfectly into management decisions. So, where are you at on hay in terms of where you want to be on hay?
So where I typically am on hay, like this time around, right now, I'd have 3 barns full, and right now I only have 1. So we're definitely seeing a lot less hay volume wise this year. It just fields fell flat. A couple of fields that usually produce, and I'm not used to. Usually one field or one farm will produce for me, but this year pretty much almost across the board, a lot of these fields just fell flat. Even though we fertilized some, we didn't do much last year because of fertilizer prices, but this past year wasn't as bad, so we fertilized some. And I can only imagine how bad it would be if we hadn't fertilized it.
Yeah, our fertilizer dealer has made that comment that a lot of people didn't fertilize or hurting right now.
Yes.
We fertilized everything. We fertilized to the test for the most part, sort of to the average of the test, because we had it custom applied, and they were close enough to each other that it was not too hard to do that. And then we added more nitrogen to our highest value hayfield. So we've actually applied nitrogen on that one twice this spring. Once in the spring, once early summer. And potentially we've talked about adding one more time on a couple fields, just because we know hay is short.
Yes.
Our hay production, we are probably maybe 50 to 75 bales behind where we would want to be. Not a tremendous amount off. I mean, that's a good amount of hay to be off by, but not an unbearable number for us. We typically like to have 800 bales in the barn for ourselves for the winter, for our animals. And we are not close to that number, let alone what we sell. So we have 1 barn of sellable hay done. We like to have about 2. We're about where we would need to be on that. On the hay that is for us, we are extremely short.
Okay.
We only have about 200 in the barn, and we'd like to have 800.
Wow.
Now, we purchase a lot, but the people we're purchasing from are behind on their hay, so we have not seen much first cutting hay because they're struggling to fill their needs. Right. Typically, we see a little bit of first cutting and then a heavier second cutting once they fill their specific needs on their farms. These are people that have their own animals, other people that they're covering, smaller clients, and then we're buying a large chunk of hay from some of these people. So it's certainly a little bit more of a challenge. We have to make decisions at this point about what we're going to do in terms of hay.
I mean, really, when we think about the hay, we have almost, I guess, two options, or 3 options, I guess. Sell animals. We have to sell animals. We have to either try to fertilize and get more hay, or buy hay. I guess that's kind of our just generally 3 options.
Yeah, and stockpiling I would consider the same as more hay. Stockpiling fescue or bale more hay. Well, one or the other has to happen. The benefit of baling is that you won't lose some of that wastage. Trampling, the challenge is you have to run the field another time, and you have to pay to put the hay into bales.
Yes.
And it's more work to feed it as hay than it is to allow animals to graze. So I don't want to suggest that one is better than the other or vice versa. I think there's trade-offs with both of them and value with both of them. On a year like this where it's short, you either have to be pretty aggressive on your giving access if you're going to stockpile fescue and really be diligent about moving them every day, every other day. I don't think this is one of those years where you can put them out into stockpiled fields for a week or 2 weeks at a time. I don't think you can afford to lose that volume that gets trampled.
Yes. I think you're definitely going to have to manage. Management is going to be the key.
Yeah, and for people that are feeding hay, similarly, if you're short on hay, you don't want to put out lots of weeks at a time. We've talked about this before, the feeding strategy and things like that. But
do some more limit feeding, avoid luxury consumption.
Avoid luxury consumption. Don't put it out for 2 weeks at a time because there's a lot more wastage, even with rings, when you put it out for those long stretches, because they play with it and they pull it out of the ring and they like to look at it and step on it and do all kinds of things that animals do just to annoy you when you have spent $50 on a roll of hay.
They just just eat it.
You keep saying it, but it doesn't work. I have a dog that currently had surgery, and it keeps trying to like open up the cut on its leg where the staples are in it, and I just yell at the dog all the time, but it does not listen any better than the cattle do. I just throw it out there for you. These animals are all the same. Small children, they all don't listen. This is my life currently. So
I understand the challenges because we have animals, and utilization of pasture is going to be really important. So we're thinking about, for us, like thinking about selling some animals, so selling actually some heifers, surprisingly. So selling some heifers, even though it's our younger genetics, we don't really necessarily need replacement animals at this point.
Yeah, we're going to do two things. I think our group of animals that we have that would become replacement heifers for our spring group, we are not keeping anything that will go in that group.
Okay.
That group right now we have 65 animals that are being bred currently. We really only need about 50. So we're about 15 heavy. We're going to lose some when we pregnancy check. Anything that is open is leaving.
Yes.
It's a guaranteed you're leaving if you are open. And we're not holding anything over. We're going to allow if that number drops back down by not having next year a group of heifers going in. We're going to accept that as part of our strategy.
Yep, attrition.
And we'll let that number drop back down in the 40s and hold a bigger group of heifers in the future. We currently still have feeders in the barn. So these are calves that got weaned in the spring, in March. They went into the barn in March, late March, and they are currently upper 6 weights, and they're going to get sold because we can't afford to keep hay. We could afford to keep hay in front of them. The way prices are right now, we can afford to feed them hay, but if it means selling a cow,
yes,
that's not an acceptable trade-off right now for the extra weight that we're going to be holding them for another 4 weeks. For us, for our genetics, for our business model, we're not in the feeder game. We're in the cow-calf. We're just by nature holding these animals because we had space to do it. And we had some hay from last year that we were, but we're now at a point where I don't want to feed any more of that hay that we don't have to, that we could utilize.
And actually, that's the other thing. The other caveat is that the prices for cattle haven't been too bad at the market. I think I was seeing $236 for heifers and $240, depending on the quality you have and the number, maybe up to even $250 for your steers. And so it was, you have those kind of prices, it's almost worth it. Like, it doesn't make, you can't go ahead and send them almost.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very interesting market. The prices are pretty high. They're strong right now. Prices of feed are high. Prices of hay are high. Hay prices right now, this is the other option, right, is to buy hay. But the price to purchase hay right now is also very high.
Yes.
And it's not, and sometimes I would say that people are gouging you, but right now the supply is so short that I'm not sure that they shouldn't ask that price, even though I personally would struggle to ask for that type of premium right now with some of my clients that we sell hay to year in and year out. I also know that they might have to pay more this year just because the supply is short. And most good clients will understand that if they're paying attention at all, that the market is just really tight and that we're paying more as well for hay. Try not to gouge people, but at the same time, like you have to make a margin on it. You can't sell it for a loss. It's not
even with
sustainable business.
With the lower yields, you're spending that same amount of diesel fuel over more acres and spending that same amount of time over more acres just to get less hay. So it's going to make it, that price is going to bump up anyway.
Yeah, it is. And actually, that was one of the things I was thinking about yesterday. I loaded some hay that we had out in the field that had gotten rained on a few times to bring it in. And I was thinking, I'm traveling a lot more on this tractor than I normally do loading my wagon.
Yes.
And it's not always so obvious when you're the person raking that you're getting less bales for raking the field, because you rake the field in the same pattern and you ted the field in the same pattern and you mow the field. And even when you bale it, you might notice that you're not stopping, reversing, lifting the gate on the baler as often, but like it's not as obvious. But when you're the person loading them onto the wagon, it's really obvious when you're running all over the field trying to pick up those bales that are like scattered. And you can't set up your wagons to be more efficient. Like there's not like I set it in the wrong spot, it was my fault. It's just the reality is there's just less bales in the field, and that means you're going to have to drive further to load that wagon.
So we had the strategy of this weekend. Usually we can drive out there, set the truck somewhere, or set the tractor somewhere, load some bales in an area, move the truck and tractor. You have one person kind of doing it all. But this weekend we had one person just shagging bales.
Yep.
And another person running the truck just because
Yep.
the bales were all over, God, like you said, God's creation on the farm.
Yeah, and that was exactly my interpretation of what was happening, was that the person collecting the bales, like, it just took so much longer. Normally, that drive that we would have been taking with those wagons, it would have been inefficient for the person loading, would have been struggling, have enough to do while the person was driving back and forth to drop wagons at the barn. But in this case, it was not really that way. I did not struggle to keep myself busy driving all over the farm.
Yeah, and so
Not what I was hoping for, but it just the reality. It was just a little bit more difficult.
yeah, when your bale density is less, you have to just travel more, and so it makes it more challenging. So we just had additional labor. So there's lots of little additional costs that thinking where we had to market. We're going to market heifers. We got to market heifers, potentially purchase some hay and probably stockpile some grasses. So kind of doing a mixture of all three strategies for us, it would seem.
Yeah, that's sort of our thing too, is that we will do a little bit of all three. We will also probably cull some cows. We have a very obvious group of spring calving cows where the majority of our group, our calves look really good, and there are some dinks.
Yep.
And this is a year where cows that are producing dinks, especially if this is not a heifer and not an animal that if this is an animal that has had dinks multiple times, this is a selling season for that animal right now, because it's very expensive to feed her, and if she's not going to produce a big calf that's going to grow well, it's a tough market.
Right, and even cows are still, price wise, cows are still resilient.
Yeah, cows are still strong. We sold a few earlier this beginning of summer that were open, that are in our fall group, that had shown up open, or one that had lost a calf, spring group, essentially not lactating. She had been pregnant, but she had lost one. They sold very well, and actually they sold some of them actually back on. You could tell just by buyer number process. Young cows. So this is an interesting market. I was just looking at the market report earlier this week, and a lot of heifers at the market. Yep. As a percentage of the total number of animals sold as feeders, feeder heifers were higher than feeders.
Really?
And that's the last couple weeks I've seen that, which I think is a very interesting dynamic. So I think what we might be seeing, this is not the economist doing a true analysis of what's happening right now.
Anecdotal at best.
Anecdotal at best, but I would expect that other people are having the same thought that, like, they're going to sell all their steers.
Yep.
They're also going to think about selling heifers, and they might think about selling heifers earlier because they just don't want to keep and hold hay prices are high, and the price for the animal is high. They might just not see a lot of value in heifer on this type of.
Yeah, it's difficult. Maybe we need to have any bird eye on.
We might need as much help as we can. Yes, Josh. But maybe an economic position would be really interesting. The market's been shrinking. It's been very obviously shrinking. I think it's still shrinking. I still saw whole cow numbers that I thought were pretty high on that market report, and I've kind of been watching on and off for the last couple of months. I still see a lot of people selling cull cows when I look at those market reports. So at some point, the market shrink will stop. There will be a set number of cows that are going to stay in operations. But last year was tough price-wise. It was tough to handle. Even now, the prices are a little funky. Prices have gone up. They're much stronger now. But hay prices are going to be very high again this year. Feed prices are still strong. Like, they're still high, not as high as they were at the peak, but haven't gone down by any significant amount. And fertilizer, we'll see what it comes down this fall. I think there's predictions it's going to come down a little bit, which would be nice. But the cost of doing business has gone up
dramatically,
and in the same way that the price of cattle have gone up I don't know. That it's a very interesting market. It's a very dynamic market, and
it's definitely volatile right now. It's definitely volatile, and we're going to have to see where everything kind of levels out.
Yeah, I don't know. The one thing that we have that I don't know what you do, but we have 6 steers that are basically ready to process this fall. And we're making command decisions right now about what we're going to do because we don't really want to sit on meat right now. We
Yep.
don't have to, but at the same time, I don't want to sell a heavy animal. I'm not going to sell for a price at the market.
Right.
So we're trying to weigh those dynamics at this point. We don't want to waste hay or feed on those animals, but at the same time, I'm not fed to market.
To the market. Yeah. Just give it away for nothing. I know we have a couple bulls. We're probably going to try to push to sell this fall. And then we have a couple of our heifers. If they are a little heavier, a little more resilient, they might be processed eventually. So if we can't find an alternative market for them, we might process them and eat them ourselves or eat them and sell them.
Yep, it's going to be a very interesting market. The cost for meat right now is very interesting. I think honestly, most people ahead profit wise to have just sold animals at 800 pounds than brought them up to 1200, unless they have a pricing strategy that has gone up in the last year pretty significantly. It's a very interesting dynamic because prices have jumped so much on both the input costs and the cost of the
final product here.
Yeah. So in all, it's a very interesting dynamic right now. So sort of your strategy is sell some heifers, cull some cows, stockpile some things, and are you going to buy hay too?
Yeah, I probably have to buy hay. My goal will be to sell all of our heifers, buy some hay just as a buffer. Usually have a kind of a 50, 100 bale buffer. We kind of work through that for the most part. So we might be definitely buying some hay and definitely stockpiling some grass.
Yeah, we're going to do probably not as much stockpiling because we don't tend to stockpile at most of our farms. We will probably stockpile one of the farms. The other ones, just from a management strategy, they don't stockpile that well. Just from personal experience, the fields don't separate in a way to make them very easily grazed stockpiling setup.
Okay.
Just the dynamics of the farm, it's really interesting to do. So some of the farms will get stockpiled, other farms will not get stockpiled. Definitely looking to sell all of our calves. And in fact, what we typically would do is wean, background, and then sell. We may just wean and sell.
Yeah.
We might make sure that they are weaned and on feed, but we won't hold them for 60 or 90 days like we will sell them after.
Because hay supplies, that's additional, every little bit counts at this point, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's sort of where we're at. And I'm still looking to add fertilizer to my hay fields. I'm still looking to actually see if I can get some fall growth a couple feet.
That is one of our strategies. So we have the one I did this past weekend was stockpiling for the pasture, and then we're going to at some point stockpile the rest or get additional fertilization for our hay field.
That's our hay fields that have had 2 cuttings that we're going to take a third on. They probably get 1 more to fertilize, at least nitrogen. We might hold off on doing any P&K until later in the fall, trying to put it on over winter so that it's available in the spring rather than for later. They got pretty fertilizer at least.
We'll probably definitely hit it hard with nitrogen. We might do a little bit of P&K just to make sure that's not going to be a limiting nutrient.
I think that's not a bad plan. So with all of that said, what is on the agenda?
Agenda this next week will probably be like thinking about this weekend potentially fertilizing. We have State Fair coming up, so we know that's kind of going to be a time sink in the middle of August. So trying to get things done ahead of time. And then, like I said, fertilizing some, then still doing some repair to our hay equipment. Just the cutting equipment. We had some issues, hydraulic cylinders again, and then wasn't leaking bad. Then it started leaking really bad. So I have to fix that.
Yeah, we have some maintenance things. I said we have the mowers, little maintenance there. Had a front tire on a tractor develop a leak. Back at the tire shop for this. Hopefully, I'll get that one back pretty soon here. It's really awkward to drive the tractor without that tire on.
We've had to get creative. At some point, we just have additional spares for our 2 smaller ones. The 4-wheel drive one, we're just out of luck, but.
This is a 2-wheel drive, and right now it has a large wagon tire on the front, which works, but it it pulls it a little bit
Yep.
to the side. I'm sure you know how
Yep.
this works, but it
works.
it's enough for us to move it around and minor work with it, but it's certainly not what I would if I had to. I wouldn't want to cut hay with it that way. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Wouldn't want to have to fight the whole day. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't want to fight it for hours on end. I'd be very angry if I had to do that. No one wants me. Okay. With that, I think we'll end the podcast for today. Hopefully we'll be back next week with another one. We're trying to get ourselves back on schedule this summer.
Yep.
Schedule's been a little bit tricky for getting these recorded, but things are getting sort of into a more normal routine again here now that we're done with such. So
Classes will be starting here soon, so that'll definitely put us into a more regimented schedule here.
at least for the fall teaching schedule for this one.
For me.
Yeah. So with that, we'll end our podcast for today, and we will see you next week with another podcast.
Take care, everybody.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.